Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to the Disclosure Team YouTube channel. This is going to be a really good conversation. I'm really excited for this one. Two of my colleagues from UAPMediaUK. Let's bring them straight in. Mr. Graeme Rendall and
Hello.
Mr. Dan Zetterstrom. Thank you both for joining me. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, how are you both?
We've both been too polite there, waiting.
British Reserve.
There we go, man. But yeah, I'm glad you're both okay. Yeah, this is going to be a really good conversation. Obviously, I'm just so excited now that the book's been out for a little while, Graeme. We'll go into all of how it's been received and maybe even dive into a few of the stories. Sure. I know you've covered a little bit already on like UCR and stuff, but
I'll cover some different stuff. How about that for you?
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much. And I have got it as my background behind us, but I guess we can't see that much. But I've also, we'll show it to everyone because I've got it and I'll share my screen. Dan sent me a really nice version of it. Yeah, of course.
Is that because the image is... Oh, no, I see it. Sorry, it's behind our windows.
It's behind.
Sorry, I was looking behind you.
Do you know what? I spent a bit of time playing around with it. I was going to have it behind me, and I thought, we'll just have it behind us all.
Yeah, that's cool. So, it kind of looks like I'm firing at Graeme.
Well, I'd rather be you than somebody else.
I'm a terrible shot. You're going to be fine.
So yeah, like I said, we'll get into the book. We'll talk about it and maybe just go off on a tangent on a few other subjects, you know.
Fine.
If you're happy with that. We've been having some weird and wonderful conversations behind the scenes through our UAP Media UK chat, which it just makes me think a few weeks ago when I joined and you guys told me that what to expect. I think we'll touch upon that because the conversations just do go off in so many different areas and I absolutely love it. Even if I don't contribute sometimes, I read them all and it's absolutely amazing. So I'm just going to address everyone in the chat. We've got a few people in here. Thank you for being here, guys. If you've got any questions, fire away. You don't have to super chat or anything like that. I'm not big on that. So just you know, ask questions and we'll get there. One thing I will say as well, I was going to wear the t-shirt, but it was blurring my green screen and stuff. But I've got the t-shirt, Graeme. I've been reading the Kindle and I ordered the paperback last night as well.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Above and beyond the Call of Duty.
Well, you know, everyone has been showing this paperback and how it feels in their hands. And I did a little bit of a book blitz and ordered like 7 books on Amazon just to start building up a UFO collection. And yours had to be in there. So
thank you.
No, hey, it's my pleasure, man. So
Graeme is just today he messaged me saying he'd put my complimentary copy in the post that's signed by him, and I'm very excited to pop her on my shelf.
Yeah, that's the thing. The only thing with me is I really would love to have this book display behind me, but I just green screen it because you don't want to see my room. You see, I'll have to build a giant bookshelf and make it look like I've got lots of interesting books when I really haven't. Oh, look, Ryan Sprague in the chat. Hello, Ryan. How's it going? Good to see you in here. Good to see everyone jumping in.
Hey, Ryan.
You what? Sorry, Dan.
I was just saying hello, Ryan.
Yes.
It's whenever I see Ryan, it's a pinch me moment, just because you know, he was one of the people that I watched before I kind of, you know, waded into the deep end, and now he's here watching us.
I'm exactly the same, man.
It's very strange, Vinny, when these people who, you know, I just used to listen to podcasts. There was somebody behind a microphone. Sometimes I didn't even know what they looked like in real life, and now I'm speaking to them. You know, they're messaging me, speaking to me, and it's I do have to pinch myself. I said that to someone the other day. I really have to wake up and sometimes and just go, "Is this really happening?" So yeah, it's wonderful. It's all good.
I feel exactly the same. Like literally the same feeling, and you don't get used to it. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Oh, look, we've got Mr.
Ryan has asked who watches The Watchmen, and I just want to say it's the DoD IG. That's who watches The Watchmen.
Great answer. Yeah. Love it, love it. Luis Jimenez, I assume, behind the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Good to see you here. We will be talking about the Big Phone Home. I did watch all 3 days all of it. That's probably why I look a little bit more tired today. It's been a few late nights on.
Well, it kind of started late for us over here, right? You know, 5, I think it was 5 p.m.
Yeah.
And then it went into the kind of wee hours. And yeah, same as you, I found myself kind of staying up because some of those panels were great.
I couldn't stop.
In fact, all of them were, not even some of them.
It was good that we got to do our day and do the family thing, and then in the evening got to start it. There was benefits to that, but then I guess not so much beneficial when you're going into the wee hours and you're like, this is so amazing, but I'm tired. Like,
I had to sort of quit at about 10 o'clock each night, and then I'll just watch the rest. 6 o'clock the next morning, I would just watch the rest in one big swoop, sort of thing. So yeah, I envy you guys sitting up in the wee small hours.
Don't envy it. We've got these Clockwork Orange-esque contraptions that keep us awake.
Oh, indeed. Oh, so let's jump into the main reason why we're here, and that is the book, Graeme. Like I said, I know you've spoken about it a couple of times since it's been released, but let's start with, how long's it been out now? A week, something like that?
It's been about maybe just under 2 weeks now.
Just under 2 weeks. That seems to have flown by, but
it does.
How has it been, and has it gone above and beyond expectations, or like just give us your general feeling?
Really, I'm not a first-time author, but I've only released 3 books. The other 2 on UFOs. And the thing is, you never know how they're going to be received. You have an idea based on like what people were saying on Twitter when I said I was writing it, and I got some really nice comments, and people were saying, I look forward to it. But at the end of the day, you actually never know, whether you are going to sell copies, whether it's going to sort of be, appreciated, whether when people read it, whether they're going to enjoy it, or whether they're going to take it seriously or not. And then, of course, you don't know what the comments are going to be like afterwards as well. So at the moment, I'm in this kind of like hiatus, this kind of limbo, waiting for people to finish the book and then let me know how they feel. And I'm always conscious of the fact that somebody might just turn around and go, it's crap. So I'm hoping not. But, you have that kind of sinking feeling that you think, oh, God, what have I unleashed here? So I'm hoping it's going to be well received, and I'm desperate for people to actually let me know, how they found it and what they've got out of it, and whether there's anything I could have put in or how I could have said differently, or how just their feelings about the book. Basically, I'm also desperate for some Amazon reviews. I've got a couple already, but I'd love to have some people who I don't know coming forward to say, this is what I felt about the book, good, bad, or indifferent. It all helps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm probably getting towards halfway point now, and it's still as good as it was from the start. It is, the depth and detail is incredible, and it's inspired me to show where you should go with your level of research and how deep you really should go. So it's an incredible tool as well as an incredible book. So yeah, thank you for that personally. So and also what I will say with regards to the Amazon things, if I see it anywhere or anyone saying I'm going to read this and that, I will always comment, make sure you give it an Amazon review.
Because Joss in your comments, I believe he's from Holland.
Yes.
I think he said, where can you get it from? Amazon Holland, their .nl site. I believe you can probably find it through there. So you can get on pretty much all the different Amazon portals. It's certainly available right across the world. I made sure that it was.
And one good thing we've noticed as well is the speed at which it gets posted out and received by people it's literally a few days, from, I think it's buy to print to buy or buy to print. I forget the terminology.
Yeah, it's print on demand. And I think when Lewis, when he actually ordered a copy, I believe on Sunday, and he said he got it on Tuesday. So that's crackers, 2 days turnaround. The author copies, because I'm obviously getting copies to send out to people like Dan and Olof as well, obviously, as a thank you for doing the cover. They take considerably longer because I get them obviously at cost price. That takes like a week or something, or maybe even 10 days for those books to get to me. So that's why there's been a delay in sending Danny's book. It's not like I've just been dragging my feet.
It's making me sweat.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to post my copy off to you, Graeme. Get it personally signed and stuff like that. And
I'll just do it when I see you next, Vinny. I'll do it that way, mate.
even better.
I'll come down and see you in Sheffield or something like that. How about that?
Anytime, mate. I've got a spare room. You can stay. We'll go out, have a couple of glasses of red wine, and
sounds good.
That'll be fantastic. And that's open to everyone in UAP Media UK. Sorry, chat. Maybe if we get to know each other a little bit.
He's got an Airbnb sideline, haven't you?
It's not a bad shout, you know. I've got this. I'm literally in my attic room now. It's huge, and I've got this glorious vintage French antique double bed that doesn't get used. So it's the kind of the guest room as well as my office and studio. So yeah, it's where people crash when they come.
That's cool. I'll come down, and just the whole time I'm there, I'll leave a stream running the whole time. We'll just talk to everyone.
Yeah, just be aware the camera is going to be on all the time if you do that.
I mean, people know what real life looks like, right?
Hey man, you said it, not me. Oh right.
I like how Dutch UAP Wilfred says, "Our copy is delivered by UAP."
Hey, it must be if it's that quick. Blimey. Definitely, man. This is what these unknown drones are that are flying around Tucson and stuff. They're just, it's Amazon.
Well, they're Amazon drones, aren't they? They're delivering copies.
Jeff Bezos is clearly better at printing books on demand than he is at space travel.
There you go.
Oh god, yeah.
So yeah. So Graeme, here's a question. I don't know if it's been asked or not. Did you stumble across any difficulties when writing the book? Something that you really wanted to do or write, whether it be a story or something that you just kept hitting roadblocks or struggling to find conclusions or data or information, but you were persistent? Yeah,
definitely. So everybody comes up to you and says, when you're looking at Foo Fighters and when you're reading source material or you're reading stuff on the internet just to try and get some background, and you always get the story, well, the Germans saw them too. And it's something that you see everywhere. And it's a lovely anecdote, but I wish I had a quid for every time I've either read it or heard it from somebody, because actually trying to track down the stories of the Luftwaffe, seeing these kind of things for themselves is incredibly difficult. If it's in the records, then they must be buried away somewhere, because I've never ever seen reference to actual particular documents from the Luftwaffe archives. Now, they're actually in America because they were taken there after the war, but nobody's ever come across them. I'm not entirely sure anybody's really looked through them, but you'd have to have be fairly fluent in German to understand them, and you also have to be fairly fluent in German sort of military the lingo to be able to understand as well. So there's a couple of handicaps there for somebody like me. I mean, I do know a little bit of German, but I'm not by any means fluent in it at all. So that's one obstacle, but also it's just the case of the stories that are. I mean, I don't know if you've got to that part of the book yet, but I have a chapter with the stories I've been able to find or I've been able to, or I've dug up from some really obscure locations. And actually, I don't put much stock on any of them, really, because they've got nothing that you can sort of get a hold of and go, right, I can actually chase that down. I can, try and see if I can sort of get to the bottom of that. I can corroborate it, or I can find somebody, who's willing to, sort of talk about it or whatever. I tried in vain to actually talk to Robert Fleischer, the German sort of researcher. I sent him messages and things, but I never got any reply. I understand he speaks English, I believe, but I didn't. But I never got anything back from him, unfortunately. I would be interested to ask him, does he have anything that he has on this subject? Because I would have thought if anybody does, he would. But then again, not everybody looks at this time frame, and I think this is where the problems are, just the major problems beyond what I've just said there, just right across the whole subject is the time difference. So we're looking at nearly 80 years ago. All the people who were witness to these events, most of them are 99% of them are dead now, and the ones that are left are probably to the point where you wouldn't necessarily probably be able to get too much in the way of detail from them, because their recall might be so good nowadays. The chances that we had to actually get this information from a wider group of people involved in the war have gone 30, 40 years ago when people started dying. This book should have been, and I said in the book itself, it should have been written 30 years ago, but obviously it's just one of these things. You just, you can't regret that kind of thing. You're just going to move on and do the best you can. But if people, years ago in the 50s or 60s had the same kind of desire to look at those cases, in addition to the ones that they were doing, like the contemporary cases, that I'm sure there would be much more come out, and they might have found sort of corroborating witnesses in the squadrons that could have said, yes, this happened, and it's not just that the single witness, or maybe sometimes two witnesses from a bomber saying, we saw this and we're not sure what this was. So that is a big opportunity missed. But really, one of the things I would love to talk about in a bit is the reason why this subject sort of fell by the wayside for at least 50 years until it was sort of picked up a bit. So that's quite an interesting story, which I love to get across, which is the real reason why this subject hasn't probably had the attention that it deserves.
Yeah, one thing I've seemed to have picked up on in the last week or two, judging by just the speaking about it and stuff, is that a lot of the information that may have been out there publicly, there was a lot of dates and pieces of information that were actually incorrect.
Yeah,
So
that's Keith Chester's book in 2007, Strange Company. It was great for its day, and a lot of people like it. And actually, I have it. I think it's still a great book, but it was probably the first one I'd seen that had a much wider spread of information than had previously been reported in public. Unfortunately, when I started, because I used it as a kind of as a base for where I could go and what I could look at. That's even before I started looking at the book. I started checking out some of these things because I thought, well, I'm in a good position here. The stuff I'm interested in, the access to the sort of data I already have just lying around at home, I could probably work out some of these whether they're true or not, and just as my own kind of like exercise, just as a way of just checking, and the more I dig into the stories, the less I kind of found, well, actually, that's wrong. There was a date of a raid which didn't take place that night. There was names of witnesses which were incorrect. There was actually aircraft types that were wrong. So you just wonder what else was kind of slightly. It wasn't anything major, but it just let me sort of think, well, how much of this book doesn't actually make sense. And I didn't even look at any of the Pacific stuff. It was just the European things I could actually check. So I thought, well, and I don't like to be too kind of condescending, but it was just, I just thought, well, I could probably do a maybe a bit better job in this. Certainly with this kind of thing, and just chasing down, the names and make sure I get them from the official records, because that's probably all it needed. I'm not sure how much kind of background check that was done on these kind of stories. And we can get to some of the hoaxes a bit later on if you want. There are some stories in that book which I've said, and I think you might have come across them already, which I've said, these can't have happened because such and such wasn't even in the squadron at the time they say they were. So, there are stories like that. And I'll talk about one of those when as this extra information I'll mention a bit later on. And because there's no sacred cows here. I don't want to sort of hold the Foo Fighters stories and the witness stories and all that as being something I can't I can't knock down. If they're wrong, I'm not going to just skip over them and say, just forget about that. I'll just push that under the carpet, sort of thing. I'll call them out for what they are, because everybody should do that. If you come across something that's wrong or is being misrepresented in ufology, you should call it out, or at least ask people to actually investigate it and make sure that what's being said is accurate. Because the last thing we'll want to do is to be making conclusions on false information. It doesn't do anybody any good whatsoever. So
no, absolutely. I mean, it's not just time is not an excuse to forget important details. Imagine you look 50 years in the future from now and getting the name of David Fravor or Alex Dietrich wrong because time has passed and it don't matter, then it was close. That's vital information. It doesn't make it less important just because time has passed. I'm going to jump across to you, Dan, because the question I got for you is, in your growth of looking into UFOs over the past 5-10 years of your interest in the subject, where did Foo Fighters fall in like your knowledge base and your interest base? Obviously, because we all know 2017 blah blah blah. Is that something you kind of held in your head and thought about, and if you had an idea about it?
Yeah, I mean, the Foo Fighters is something I grew up on the X-Files, so this stuff is all woven in, the Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something that's been on my mind. And these kind of, these crafted, these balls of light are fascinating because going back that far, obviously it can't be modern day technology. We're kind of, able to sweep that possibility off the table. So it just begs the question. And obviously we have better capabilities to kind of sense and track these things now. So, it makes you wonder back then, what did they see that isn't spoken about, But like Graeme said, it's really important to push past that uncomfortable truth, because you might find that sometimes stories and places have kind of become, almost like myth making. And we probably all do it from time to time. We're relaying a case and we just kind of can't remember a detail that doesn't seem important to us at the time, but that person goes on to spread that story and so on and so forth. And then we end up with something that, is, half the ones with like alien dolls peeking around the corner and stuff like that, people that put the time into looking into it know within about 5 minutes, yeah, this is nonsense. But other people will just simply take it on face value and run with it. And I think it's important to be aware of that, and work like Graeme's done here is just fantastic because it gives everyone a reference and a much better baseline to start from.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I find myself having to caveat almost every other sentence I say or write these days, because semantics and that are being really pulled apart in very fine detail these days. Because if they pick up on a word where it could mean this, could mean that, people will go to town on you meaning that when it was actually that. It's brutal. It's really brutal. So yeah, I hear
Twitter with 104 or was it 280 characters, whatever, you can understand why people don't have nuance. It's quite a direct form of communication, and people do get things wrong, or there's a kind of misinterpretation of what people say. But when you've got like a long form book, you can't do that. You have to be accurate. You have to stand or fall on the accuracy of the information that you've got in it. So, I'm not just going to put any old rubbish in there. I check stuff out, and yes, okay, I may have stuff wrong, and I'm happy for people to come and say, look, that's incorrect, Graeme, and I'll go away and change it. I'll bring out a new version of it with, revised information. That's easy enough to do, but I'm pretty confident the stuff that I've put in is accurate. Everything's referenced, as you probably understand, Vinnie. There's quite a lot of references in there, aren't there?
Absolutely.
It gets to the point that there's like 1,154 footnotes, I believe. So they're all kind of referenced, the sources of information. So it's not like I'm just pulling stuff out of my head. Sure. But I've also done that as well. So if anybody does want to sort of do what I did with Keith Chester's book, if they want to go and look at just pick some stuff at random from what I've put in and say, has Graeme got his facts right? People can go and chase down those leads and look for themselves. But actually, it's a bit more than that as well, because people can use that information as a springboard to go on and do their own research and say, well, I can probably do a better job than Graeme has done. And I'm happy for them to do that. This is not my subject. This is not just something I want to keep to myself and go, no, you can't research it. This is mine. This is for everybody. It's not just for me. I just happen to be somebody who wrote a book about it. That's all.
Yeah. I think one thing I always find myself doing when researching cases and getting quite deep into them is placing yourself in the eyes or the seat of the pilot, and because of what they're saying and that. And I've done that with the Nimitz case, and that with all of the data and information available. I've possibly put myself in the shoes of Robert Salas, for example, because we know a lot about the 1967 Malmstrom Air Force Base case. Never in my decade of researching have I ever been able to do that with cases pre-Roswell. But when I read your book, or so far, I've actually placed myself in the shoes of those people involved in those cases. And it's so incredible to be able to do that for the first time. It's never been done before in that detail and that's a massive thing that I really wanted to tell you about, Graeme, that you've been able to take us back even further and really get an idea of what it might have been like, because it seemed like it was really scary to be in those really basic aircraft with the weapon systems and what the possibilities of could go wrong, when the technology wasn't really there like it is today,
I felt it was important. I mean, I do try and set the scene at the beginning of the book in terms of what it was like to be in a bomber flying over Germany with fairly rudimentary navigation aids, bombing aids, and all the rest of it, just to give some people an idea of what it was like for the crew, not just seeing all these strange objects and lights that they were seeing, but just the day-to-day kind of, some of it was monotony, some of it was terror, some of it was somewhere in between. Just flying to Germany and back, was an ordeal, even without all the rest of it, without being shot down or attacked by night fighters or having something wrong with the aircraft, all the rest of it. So, they had all that to contend with. And then, of course, there's all this other strange stuff that goes on as well. So, yeah, putting yourself in the shoes of the people who were there, well, not on the ground, but on the air, so to speak, is something that it's difficult sometimes for an author to get across, especially for somebody like me who sort of has had 45 years sort of looking at this kind of stuff, so I'm quite well versed with it. So in my head I'm pretty confident about I know what I'm looking at and how this all would probably look and how it would play out for the people on the ground. Putting it to some maybe trying to write it down for somebody like you or for Dan or for somebody else, it's a different thing entirely, and you never know how it's that you succeed in that. So I'm really pleased that you felt that something I managed to achieve. So yeah, I'm really happy about that. Thank you.
No, it's just a different angle, because we can all read stories and go through it and think that's great data, that's great information, but I like it when you can drift off and imagine yourself in those places, or in those aeroplanes, or in those battles or situations where you have to make split decisions with rudimentary air vehicles, like so yeah, that's what really grabbed me really early on. So yeah, I think that's a huge thing. Dan, let's jump back to you, because you were an integral part of the production of the entire thing. When you and Graeme were talking, and I mean, this is probably what I want to come to. When did you and Olof come into this together, or was it something that was brought to you first, and then Olof got involved after the fact? Like, how did it really break down?
So Graeme shared what he was working on, at which point in the conversation I asked him kind of for a standout story, because I knew at some point he'd need a cover, and I thought it might be cool to kind of see what Olof and I can come up with, because we'd kind of become friends, and we always kind of run our art past each other, and he'll feed back to my stuff and I'll do the same. So it's kind of cool to cross-pollinate, but we'd never really done something full-on collaboration. So I was like, oh, this could be quite a cool first project, so I sent it to him, and we just left it after the suggestion. One of those things, what projects are like. You have 10 go in and only 9 come to fruition, but the one kind of perks up at some point and it becomes a complete thing. But it just so happened that the morning where Graeme kind of formally asked me if I'd do some art was the same morning where Olof and I had kind of found the second wind of creating it. So we'd been kind of pulling a few references and talking about what we do kind of in detail. And as soon as Graeme asked us, then it was just like, cool, we're kind of this is I'm not going to tell you what we're doing, but we've been working on it for a while, and this is kind of serendipitous. It was very, very cool the way it came about. And actually creating it was it was an absolute pleasure to do that with Olof, to kind of entangle creatively. It's hard to, in conversations we've both said that it doesn't really feel like our work. It kind of feels like a baby of both our work, and I think you can see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But the thing is as well, it showed me, I've been a fan of both of you guys for some time, and the whole UAP media thing, because it felt like everyone was an important piece of the puzzle, almost like Voltron. You've got the head, the arm. It really did. And it's shown to me now, being a part of it, that I see it on a regular basis, that everyone's got their strengths in their main field, but they've also got strengths in all the other fields of everyone else, and the intertwining of the conversations and that brings out some of the best and most interesting details in conversation that I've never been a part of, basically, but I'm sure there can't be any better. So that it's just yet another compliment I have to bring to the plate because of you guys, and we can't forget everyone else, Adam, Dave, Andy, Chris. It's just fantastic, man. And So yeah, so Graeme, jumping back to the book, I'm trying to think of something that I can ask you that hasn't been spoken about. You mentioned earlier that you talk about maybe a case or cases that you haven't mentioned before. Is there an angle that you can come at with that kind of thing? Something that maybe relates to.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll talk about the hoax element.
Yes,
that's all right.
yes,
I'll talk about that side of thing. So this is the kind of the depth I had to go to just to make sure that these cases that I was reading about that were already percolating into the kind of UFO press in the sort of 1990s at the end of this kind of strange period of 50 years where the Foo Fighters have basically just got a bad press or no press from ufology. As Ryan said on his own show on, when was it? It was Friday night. He mentioned that ufology is basically just the Foo Fighters as though practically they didn't exist. It was just skipped over, in a lot of press in books that were in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, or if they did, they just got a couple of lines and let's move on to the ghost rockets, let's move on to Kenneth Arnold. So there was quite a just nothing. But if you read some of the kind of limited circulation newsletters like Flying Saucer Review and some others, then there were little fragments of information just kept popping up every so often, but they were never chased down at all. So the only kind of narrative over this 50 years is from that original American Legion article from December 1945 that was written by an aide to the head of the US Air Force. And he'd got the story. This officer had got the stories from some of the airmen in Europe who he was actually embedded with. So that was basically the only source material that most ufologists and people writing books and magazines had to go on for about 50 years until a group of researchers in the States in the mid-90s started actually accessing the war diaries of some of the squadrons, the American night fighter squadrons who were seeing these things over Europe over the winter of 44-45. But in the meantime, some stories were coming through, and Tim Good had a story of a sighting in May 1943 over Germany, and then Nick Redfern also had another story. Now, what an author, I'm not going to say who it is, actually included a story in one of their books, and it's a fairly famous British author, had a story in one of his books about it was just after D-Day, and this gentleman said he was a pilot, and they published this account of him sitting at a debriefing table after a raid against Stuttgart, and it was the second of three more or less consecutive raids on the city just after D-Day, and he said that he'd overheard a conversation at the next table, because you bear in mind all the bomber crews, when they used to come back to the base, before they could even go and have a cup of tea, whatever, and unwind, they had to go and sit in front of an intelligence officer and basically get debriefed about the mission. So it was a case of what time did you take off? Did you see any searchlights and flak en route? Did you drop your bombs at the right time? What altitude did you do that from? Did you see any night fighters? All this kind of stuff. The stuff that would be helpful for the next raid or for other raids, working out what the Germans were doing. It was always the case. Doesn't matter whether you were a bomber, fighter, anti-submarine aircraft. All the crews had these kind of debriefings. So anyway, this guy's sitting at a table, his crew, they're talking through the mission with this intelligence officer. Next table, another crew's doing exactly the same thing. And this guy, this pilot, overhears this conversation about a crew being chased by a light. Excuse me. So, sorry.
Grab some water or something. No worries, man.
You're excused.
Yeah, just going down the wrong way.
That's all good.
So you get with age.
It's not age, man. I do it all the time,
Yeah. So here's this story, and that's what gets put into this book. And you have the name of the pilot who overheard the conversation. You even have the squadron he was with. Now that's information you could go to the records in Kew Gardens in London and find that information. And for some reason, somebody hasn't done that, and they've just put the story straight in the book. Or if they haven't gone that deep into the story, because as soon as I looked at the crew manifests for the squadron for that month, I found where the raids were. Well, they actually weren't when he said. They were 7 weeks afterwards. They were in July 1944 rather than June 1944 when D-Day was on. So that sort of made me think, okay, well, there might be a bit more to this. So looked into got the squadron records. You can see the manifests. You can see which crew, which aircraft, which raid. well, the second Stuttgart raid, he wasn't on. I looked right through the month, and he was only in the first day of that month, and then he just disappeared from the squadron. That name. And here's the next bit. Here's the best bit, though. He wasn't even a pilot. He was a flight engineer. So, and I checked that, and there was actually a list of all, and that just wasn't through the squadron records. There was a list of all the crew on the squadron, broken down into crews. And that was a separate document, and I found that, and it said, yeah, he's a flight engineer. He was listed second on each crew, which meant he was a flight engineer. So he wasn't a pilot. What he was saying was wrong. He wasn't even on the squadron at the time. He wasn't flying missions, so there was no way he would have been in the debriefing room, sitting with a crew, talking to an intelligence officer to overhear another man's kind of account. So something didn't add up here. So I just say that in the book, say, well, sorry, this story either didn't happen or it didn't happen in the way he said it did, because what he's saying is wrong on 2 counts. So what else is wrong with it? So It's important these things are basically sort of put out there, because I don't want people just to regurgitate these same stories and say, I'm sorry, because you do have to go along and say, well, that's wrong. And that's it. And that's not the only one in the book. I've got quite a few others where I've looked at them, and these are accounts that have either been in English language books or, in a couple of cases, French language books. There are quite a few stories in there, some of which are not 100%, and 1 or 2 are admitted hoaxes on behalf of the author who actually put them in his book in the first place.
Yeah. And did you find that you had to translate yourself a lot of, or some information? Did you?
English, German, Italian, quite a few source documents and books and all the rest of it. And some of these books go back sort of 50 years. Some of the French books are from the early 1970s. The Italian books are from the 1960s. So they go back a long, long way.
What process did you use? Because I was having a chat on Instagram earlier on a live talking about Italian cases that I've looked into and had to use Google Translate. And you automatically know as soon as the translation comes through that it's not done a good job in the translation.
You get a sense of what's there, though, Vinny. You might not get it 100%, but you get enough that you can look at stuff and go, yeah. And then if you run it backwards and forwards occasionally, sometimes it actually sort of irons itself out. But also, some of these things were also in other documents. So they were in like another newsletter, like another French newsletter or another Italian book or whatever. So then you just got multiple kind of versions of the same story. And the more you ran it through, from different sources, you got a picture of, okay, this is really what they're saying. So that's what it was. That's the way I did it. But you didn't really need to have it pinned down too accurately to work out the kind of gist of what was going on, just to work out where they were talking, whether they were talking about a real event or not. And some of the things you had to actually fill in the blanks, yourself, or myself rather. But that didn't mean to say that I was making stuff up. It was just a kind of a process where I was looking at the information and trying to say, okay, that's what they're talking about. They might not have the exact terminology down, but I know what that terminology is. So I can just substitute that word, sort of thing, or that kind of thing. So they might be talking about a particular type of German aircraft. They haven't got the terminology quite right, but I know exactly what they're talking about.
I suppose, because numbers translate quite well, whether it be dates, whether it be numbers like aircraft numbers, like the number of the plane, whatever it be, like F-14, F-16. Obviously, it's not that, but you see where I'm coming from. But so let's jump back to you, Dan, because I could speak to Graeme all day, but you are just as an integral part of this process as everyone else.
I mean, I could just listen to Graeme talk about the Foo Fighters stuff all day. I really hope that audiobook's coming, Graeme.
Hey,
but I'm not going to read it because nobody will understand what the hell I'm saying.
I don't know, man. I disagree. I think I like your accent, man. I do.
It's good. It would be really nice to kind of have like a mix of accents reading the book, you know, a couple of people, different chapters. I think that's the way to do it.
It's been mentioned before. Yeah, it's been mentioned before, hasn't it? And I did float the idea of, well, if we're going to do it sometime, then we should have a lot of people doing a chapter each. And that would work because some of those chapters are, well, you've read it already, Vinnie. So one of those chapters is getting over 100 pages, isn't it? So,
do you think we could get Ross Coulthard to read the chapter?
Yeah, with the voices.
No. We've got to keep it British, man. No offense at all to Ross, because
should we talk history, Australia's history? Technically, he's okay.
Yes, okay. I see where you're going with that, and
there are Australian people in the book. There's an Australian case, so the Australian pilot talks about his cases. So he'd be great for that. He'd be a shoo-in.
All right then. Okay, I can see where you're coming from with that. That makes sense. Yeah,
we can get Ryan to do the voiceovers for some of the American kind of reports.
There we go.
The world's your oyster here, can't we? You can get,
man, that's such a cool idea. Like, making it read. Yeah. Ooh, that's a great idea. Very cool.
There's people in the comments saying that they do British accents. I don't know where Ben Shapiro comes from. I guess
he's LA.
I'm assuming he comes from America. So anybody.
California boy. Yeah. As long as we get, the 100 page chapter. I think Andy McGrillen needs to do that.
Yeah. Well, he does a really good English accent, doesn't he, Dan?
He's great at accents.
Yeah, but I love his.
You guys don't hear half of them. I'm telling you.
I love Andy's accent as it is. When he was on the Big Phone Home, and we'll get into that in a minute. Actually, I don't mean to take away from your book, Graeme. Absolutely not. But and you know what? We can go as long as we want tonight. But I do want to talk about that. And Andy, I thought he was great on the Big Phone. We'll get into that in a minute. Can I just say something? And I hate to put you on the spot, guys. I'm just going to go and check on my daughter. Let's bring up the next part of the book that we can talk about, so I can disappear for 30 seconds. And so let's talk about it from. We've seen that a big aspect of the story are RAF and American witnesses, and obviously the Luftwaffe and Germans. Can you talk for a couple of minutes about maybe French or anybody else, or even people on the ground that may have seen anything? And I'll just dip out for 1 second.
Okay. So, there are.
We've got control of this channel. Quick.
Yeah, no, we're going to talk about something else now. Come on, Dan, what we're going to talk about. So, the case in point, there are civilian witnesses on the ground in France. Obviously, it was under occupation by the Germans. So it wasn't as if if you saw something strange in the skies, you could go and report it to your local police station or to the military authorities. There was no way that people who saw things in those days, if you were a civilian under the German occupation, were going to report it to anybody, because the last thing you would want to do is be accused of being a spy. So these kind of stories never came out at the time. So it's incredibly difficult to try and get sort of other witnesses. You're going on reports that were sort of given after the war, and in some cases, quite a long time after the war. In one case, and there's actually quite a couple of major cases in the book, which have actually been reported elsewhere, but not in English to a great degree. They've been more reported in France, and the witness didn't really come forward until the early 1980s, because he'd seen the way that some UFO witnesses were treated in the 50s and 60s, and he didn't like the way that the press and the newspapers were sort of having a go at them for being just crazy, crackpots, all the rest of it. So he kept quiet. And he was only sort of brought out the woodwork by a French researcher in the 1980s, who had basically convinced him that it was okay to talk about what he'd seen during the war. And he'd actually had two different sightings, one in France and one in Poland, when he was a worker, a slave worker for the Germans. So there was quite a lot going on in terms of the French. There were sightings in Belgium as well, which I've got listed in the book. German civilians reported things in Germany, and Austrian civilians as well. So there are reports from those in the book. There are people in Poland who saw strange objects, people in Czechoslovakia, Romania. So yes, there are civilian reports from right across Europe. And of course, there are other reports from RAF crews over the Balkans. So these are ones which have never been published before. And these are ones I found in the squadron records. And they took place in places like Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia in pretty much 1944 and 1945. And not just the time when the Foo Fighters were being seen by the Americans, but these cases go back to, say, sort of the spring of 1944, which is much earlier than has previously been thought that the main body of sightings was seen. some Russian pilots saw them as well. Those stories are a bit sort of flimsy as well, because there's not enough information that you can go and dig into you can't dig into Russian records to start with. That's practically impossible unless you've got some kind of proper clearance. There's no way they would give me the information if I just sort of contacted somebody in the Russian Ministry of Defense and say, do you mind if you can give me some squadron records? I wouldn't even know which squadron to look for, because that's the worst thing about some of these reports. The pilots are named, but you can't work out which unit they were from. You don't even know what type of aircraft they were flying. So it's practically impossible to work out what was going on and just track back to see were they really where they said they were at that time. You were going on, faith, basically. But one of the pilots was actually on a Network First documentary back in 1994, and it's available on YouTube, and you can see him describe the object he saw, and he even sketches it out as well. There's a link in the book. You can actually see it if you've got the Kindle. So, so there's a lot going on. I'm probably gone over your 30 seconds now. Sorry.
No. Do you know what I got garnered from that as well is that a lot of people not a lot of people. I've had a couple of comments that said to me, why only 1940 to 1945? Surely it's like a few cases viewed by the British and the Americans, a few by the Germans, and you've just spouted out however many other countries that have seen
there's your 50 years. So what I hinted at before, this American Legion article that was done by this aide to General Arnold, the head of the US Air Force, Army Air Force in World War II. He'd been sent on a fact-finding tour around Europe to check on logistics and other kind of welfare items for the men under his command. And he'd stayed with people at the air bases, and he spoke to the crews from the 415th Night Fighter Squadron, who were based in eastern France over the winter of 44-45. And he just collected the cases that they told him about. It's about half a dozen he had in this article. And he mentioned a daylight case involving a P-47 Thunderbolt squadron, and he had a couple of cases from the Pacific. Now, that was basically all the Foo Fighter cases that were known publicly from December 1945, when that magazine article was published, until the mid-1990s. Unless you were sort of well steeped in ufology and you were getting these limited run magazines that occasionally had a story, once every year or two, or you were buying UFO books, which might have a story maybe once in a blue moon, about a bomber crew might have seen something, and those stories were maybe I could count them on one hand. The ones I came across looking through the books I had back in the 70s and 80s, and the ones I've bought since then. That really narrows that field of vision. And the accepted wisdom, and that's what the phrase I use, was that the Foo Fighters was a phenomenon that started in November 1944, because that's what the original article said. This is how they began. That's that wording he used. So ufologists throughout the ages just thought, that's when they started, and they ran at the end of the war. So what, 6 months, 7 months? And it was a limited phenomenon which only affected the US Army Air Force night fighter crews, which there was only 2 squadrons within France and Belgium. There were 2 other units in Italy. Doesn't actually mention the Italian ones, though, in the article. And that was all there was. So a very kind of niche kind of subject with a few crews, few sightings, and nothing much else to go on. So no wonder it got the kind of short shrift that it did from the press, from ufologists in general. And that's why it just got skipped over. But actually, there was a hell of a lot more going on. And hopefully, the people read the book, they'll realize just how widespread it was, because the stories from the Bay of Biscay right across to Eastern Europe, from the North Cape of Norway across to North Africa. And I've got them all in the book. So, some of those have never been put in print before.
I have a feeling that when we watch these documentaries and they all seem to hit on the same cases, and they kind of leave their original remit behind and just all start talking about the Nimitz and everything like that. I have a feeling within a few years we'll start seeing some of the incredible cases from Graeme's book kind of starting to come through, because Graeme touched on something really important there, that you used to have to be really into the subject to, subscribe to a magazine, or to go out to get the books, or to organize with your library to kind of, ship books from somewhere else, so on and so forth. And now we're in the age of information, where someone can chuck in, Foo Fighters bracket not Dave Grohl into Google and come up with Graeme's book and instantly have a bunch of reputable information, not only some great stories to talk about, but also kind of the struggle of finding those stories and the issues with digging back into the records of old. You know, we take our the kind of record keeping we do these days for granted. I think, you know, pre-90s, that stuff didn't exist.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was that 2-part series recently, a couple of weeks ago, called the Foo Fighters. Was it? I can't remember which network it was now. It was available here. It was
on
one that
History,
featured Anna
it?
Whitty. Yeah, I think it was History. Now,
I haven't seen it yet.
It was based on Foo Fighters, but what I found that they very quickly jumped from Foo Fighters into Roswell and then threw up into the Nimitz cases. So it very briefly touched upon the Foo Fighters cases. Now, if that had been produced after Graeme's book had come out, that would not have been a 2-part series. That would have been a 10-part series, and it would have stuck with the Foo Fighters. It wouldn't have had to have gone off into post-war Roswell and Kenneth Arnold and stuff like that, because there was enough information in Graeme's book to turn it into such a detailed series. And that's what really slightly disappointed me. It wasn't a major disappointment, because it was just nice to see it put out there again with some information. But it, you know, and I loved seeing Anna Whitty. I think she's
Which, just a matter of interest, Vinnie, which cases did they cover? Do you remember any of them?
I don't even think that any specific cases jump out. I think it was more the broad outline of there were pilots across these few years that saw this and that,
and also a few of like those photographs that, you know, in private conversation. Yeah, those photographs, exactly. The kind of infamous one of the there's like a light, an orb in the background.
There's a light between there's the one between the 2 aircraft, or the one with a wing.
I think it's
that's the one. And the aircraft is a Japanese aircraft, you were telling me, and it's totally wrong, and it's just not. See, this is why I love having Graeme around. He's amazing.
So there are
He's like
books,
an encyclopedia.
I've read books where that picture of the 2 aircraft with the kind of little blob between them. I mean, those aircraft type, just the first time I ever saw that picture, I went, yeah, it's Japanese. It's a Kai 36. You know, it's an Army Corporation aircraft they were used in China. They weren't used much else in the Pacific, and they were used the first couple of years of the war, and then they were too obsolete afterwards. And you just think, no. And I've seen it even portrayed as a Luftwaffe aircraft. Hell, I've seen them portrayed as American aircraft. And you just think, really? You know, and you see that picture pop up on websites, and people attribute all sorts of labels to it. I just think, you know, come on, you know, just get your facts right, for God's sake. You know, if anybody see me screaming at the computer going, no.
But the thing I'll say quickly in defense of that 2-part series on the Foo Fighters, even though it went off into other aspects of ufology, is that Anna Whitty, and I forget the professor or the doctor's name, who was the main kind of guy in it, they didn't make any wild claims. They were very well spoken. Everything they said was within reason. It didn't go off into wild claims. So that was a really good aspect of that. But I just wish, because of the timing, that it was like a week before your book came out. Like, you know, could have been a godsend.
I don't know when it was made. It must have been made a little while ago. In that case, it was. You know,
I know.
Months ago. That's fair enough. You know, give him a pass.
It's a testament to why. You know, I know you said it in a kind of lighthearted way, Graeme, kind of looking at something and thinking, I can do better, and then going and doing the thing. You know, it can sound a little egocentric, but at the same time, anything that's ever been created has come from that feeling. Like, I can do that. I can do better. Do it. You know, like you never know what you're going to contribute. You really don't. And it can become a thing that's just bigger than you.
Absolutely.
I just wonder if I didn't do it, you know, was anybody going to do it? So, you know, that's another thing. I mean, that probably does sound really arrogant, but I hope you understand what I mean there. You know, was anybody going to invest the time and go through the records and put that together? You know, or would I still be sitting here sort of 20 years before, you know, sort of fall off the perch and think, I wish somebody had written that book, you know? So, yeah.
Well, you can do it, or you can rant 240 characters at a time about not being happy with the state.
Very true. Yeah.
One of the two.
Very true.
But listen, guys, we could talk about the book for so much longer, but we don't want to spoil it for people. So what I'm going to do is show everyone that right now on Amazon, you can now get the paperback as well as the Kindle. And I think there's a little sale on Amazon as well. They've knocked
they've knocked the price down without telling me.
Yeah. So, you know, hopefully Graeme still gets the same cut as before. Like Amazon take the hit.
I'm pretty sure. I think that's how it works. Yeah. Yeah.
But you can get it on Kindle. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, I think it's available on there. So you pay your monthly, whatever, a few pounds or dollars. and it's available on Kindle Unlimited. So please, please, I cannot implore you enough to please go and check out the book. But no, my pleasure, my friend. Like I said, I could talk about it for hours, but then we'd kind of spoil it to a degree. So like, I have to cut it off somewhere, even though I don't want to. Go on, Dan. You were about to say.
Just going to say, if it's a good time to kind of say that, the art on the front of the book, Olof and I have put up on Redbubble, and I'm going to catch myself there, Olof, not Olaf. I really like the Disney character.
Well, listen.
But you can see it on the wall behind me up there, and you can buy prints of it, and basically all of the profits from that are going to go towards the Galileo project. So you're not just getting a cool thing for your wall, you're also going to be helping UFO research.
Absolutely. And I will just, for the people that may not have seen it, because I want to emphasize the detail on this picture, because it is correct. I mean, if you look right in there, even behind the spinning propellers, you can see the RAF logos and stuff, and the detail.
And the squadron core and the code letters on the aircraft as well are accurate to the aircraft involved.
It is.
They are. And the stars are accurate to the time and place too.
Yep.
So you could totally trace it with that picture. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs in there as well. The city beneath. There's a special reason for that being there. And like I say, it all came together really, really, really organically.
Yeah, and it all relates to one of the major stories in the book as well. So this isn't just
it's actually the first story. It's the first story in the book, really. So yeah,
I always feel with that image, like you can almost hear it,
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
You can hear the shouts and the guns kind of opening up. One of the really, really cool touches that Graeme added for us was basically when you look at tracer rounds, they're not, the whole magazine doesn't have tracer rounds in it. It's only every like 10 or 12 or so.
Sure.
They're put in randomly. So you can see actually, in the colors of the bullets there, it's only every few that are kind of hitting that tracer color, which is it's neat.
And I can tell you, everyone, right now that I don't have the book. I want the book, and it's coming. It's in the post, and I want to get my hands on it. But I've got the T-shirt, and the image looks incredible on the T-shirt as well. I can promise you that. So yeah, I think I've put the Redbubble and everything in the link below. I can't remember, but I will if I haven't. I've definitely put the link to the book in there, because that's number one, of course.
On the off chance that you didn't, you can just go to the Zignal.com and just click teas and prints, and it'll take you through to the Redbubble store.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. So yeah, thank you so much, guys. We're going to move on, because that sounded a bit like we were going to finish. Sorry about that. Let's talk about the big phone home, man. Like, where do we start? I guess day one, but
what was for each of you? Who was your favorite panelist that came on? And none of you are allowed to say me, because it's not fair.
Man.
I'll start then. I had a really good time listening to Chris Leto, DJ San Marco, and Manny. Can't remember his surname. Yesterday afternoon. I was listening to it, and I just felt that was a great, was it an hour and a half or something they were on? And they were just talking incredibly about the kind of reporting procedure for the US Air Force, about, let's say, if they came across something and you were like, a squadron pilot and you hadn't reported this kind of thing before, you got to a point where you had to then be read into things, and you would be, what did Chris Leto say, given an envelope. And you had to open it, and that read like along the lines of, right, you now know about, we are investigating it. You now cannot tell anybody of this kind of thing. It was this kind of detail. And, he wasn't just talking about this kind of thing, a DJ, because he used to be an MC-130 Hercules pilot, I believe.
Yeah.
On combat talons. So he has an incredible wealth of kind of knowledge and expertise in, kind of low level and, kind of special operations flying. So, that's a kind of a particular skill set. So, they're getting some kind of sneaky beaky kind of flying, that, kind of thing they do. So there's a lot of expertise between the two of them. I came in a little bit late, about the first few minutes of the conversation, so I can't quite remember what Manny's kind of qualifications were, what his history was. But in terms of just the three of them and how they were talking and how everybody else was talking to them, that was a thrilling hour for me, just to see the kind of perspective from, kind of people who had served and fairly recently had served. And Chris Leto said he'd never seen anything, odd, but he was still interested enough to contribute, and he was contributing in a meaningful way. And it was really, I just felt that for me, that was a really good kind of conversation over, an hour and whatever period it was.
Absolutely, I agree with that so much. I had the pleasure of joining Chris on his channel a couple of weeks ago, and he really is such a nice guy, whether UAP aside and things like that. And he's connected to this subject not as an experiencer or anything like that, but just as someone who's super interested in it. And I can relate to that as a non-experiencer as well. And he's actually coming on to this channel on Saturday coming up, like next week. So yeah, that'd be great. Maybe you could join us, Graeme.
I'd love to, yeah.
There you go.
Which Saturday is this? Sorry,
this coming Saturday. Yeah.
What time?
8 p.m. UK, I think.
I might be back home. I'm actually down in York for the day, so I may not be back in time. But I'll jump into the chat at the end. How about that? Or
you can jump in at the end. We'll talk about that behind the scenes.
Okay, no worries. Thank you.
It'd be great to have you there. As far as what I enjoyed about the weekend, if I had to pull out a specific, it would be, I've got two. It would be the second day scientists, and I can't remember all their names, but I know it was the same panel with alien scientist and the guy with his workshop that was talking about, we're doing kind of anti-gravity stuff back here and stuff like that. That was so far above my head that it was pretty much at 30,000 feet above my head. It sounded amazing, and I believe that it was legit, because they could have said anything and I'd probably believed it. But I found that really intriguing, because I've never seen that really before related to the UAP subject. I do check out the Singularity Lab here and there, but I felt like that really went above and beyond when it came to the physics and a bit of theoretical physics as well, that really showed that they are involved in this subject and willing to talk to people like us and the general ufology and UAP researchers. And then I have to shout out, and I know people will probably say, "Oh, boring," but the conversation with Lou Elizondo, Ross Coulthard, and Robert Salas did stand out for me, because more so because of Ross Coulthard. He alluded to some stuff that I'm really interested in at the moment with bobfish and tracking frequencies and stuff. And that was a conversation that was going on all weekend, especially in the chat. I know, Dan, you can relate to that, because I saw a lot of comments in the chat going back and forth about these signatures and this piece of equipment, this one simple piece of equipment that we probably all should know about, that's quite basic and not as technical as you might think. And that's really got me thinking. And I've actually reached out to a lot of people the last couple of days who might allude to that, because I'm so desperate to know. So what do you think of that, Dan? Did that really capture you as well?
It did. The signature stuff is an interesting one. On the off chance people know James McDonald, he spoke about a radio signal that he thought was UFOs, and then, long story short, was found dead in the desert. There's no easy way to say that. But he suggested the UFOs emitted a radio signal that was oscillating, and if anyone's got the right equipment, go for it and see what happens. Between 2995 to 300 megahertz in a beat frequency of 600 hertz. So if anyone knows what that means, let us know, please. And we'll kind of have a look at, maybe what it leads to. In terms of the sensor, I can't say anything about that anymore. So sorry.
I understand.
But
I understand.
One of the standout guests for me, you're right, Robert Salison is, what is this? The Lou Elizondo show is hilarious. Part of me thinks that it's just, an elderly person messing with people because they like to drop bombs and giggle,
Absolutely.
But yeah, that panel was really interesting. Ross had a few super interesting questions. Everything that Lou says always captivates me, but the standout of the weekend for me would have to be Erling Strand from Hasterland, just because I wasn't expecting it. And we've had a few people talking about Hasterland who weren't involved in the work, but are familiar with it, and it was really great to see Erling on there, kind of getting his dues as someone who's studied the Earthlight or UAP phenomena, and sharing that. It's a really, really interesting bit of research that was done really before we kind of had the internet and everything like that. And
Yeah.
you know, they had really low. I remember they would stream. And I think you still can, only certain webcams work. You can kind of watch the areas. And I used to do it way back in the day and just sit there and watch them for hours. I'd have the window open on the side while I was watching a movie or something. And I never saw anything, but you know, it was a big part of my life. So seeing Erling kind of there was super cool moment for me.
Absolutely. And I think he started that back in, was it 93? Yeah. And
Yeah,
like
way back when.
Hestalin project.
Yeah, and we're talking, you know, they did their studies 84, 85. The activity dropped off. It's hard to know what to make of it, right?
It is, because if you look, I mean, I've looked into it a little bit over the last couple of days because I've seen it crop up not only on the Big Phone Home but on Twitter and things like that. And
well, we can say it. Campbell, where I hope I'm getting that surname right. He posted out the idea that Hestalin was the same thing as the Tic Tac. In a very authoritative manner, and that kind of you know created a lot of discussion.
It did, but it's good because it's brought the discussion forward, even if I respectfully disagree with a fair amount of the points in the article. But it did bring it to my attention. It made me look into it, so I can say that that's a positive from what he's done. And I have a lot of respect for the guy, you know, so no harm done. But I think what's also interesting with the Hestalin lights is that it isn't just a case of orbs. There have been physical craft, or what people say they've seen physical craft of various shapes and sizes, not just strange lights. But then when they do see strange lights, they've been tracked at incredible speeds, the kind of speeds that you can relate to what we've been told the Tic Tac has traveled at back in 2004. So I see the correlation or the connection. I think it's just we need to be careful about going from here to all the way over there instantly.
For sure.
So
this is the thing, is kind of
you know,
making answers where there aren't any. It's cool to speculate and to kind of have conversations. But like I'm fond of Hestalin just because I think there's a lot of overlap. And though not all Earthlights are UAP and not all UAP are Earthlights, you know, there are a few possibilities. Either it's nothing to do with it at all, or they're kind of, you know, the same phenomena, whatever they are, or they're not the same phenomena, but the amount of energy produced by these lights and the way that they do it is a mechanism by which we could achieve the technology the UAP are using. So it's an incredible UFO lab, and it's not the only, you know, place on Earth that these things occur. There are lots of them. Longdendale lights in the UK, the Brown Mountain lights, the Min Min lights in Australia. You know, they're everywhere. And people listening probably have a feeling like, oh, hold on a second, this just sounds like they were studying UAP without saying it. Yeah, that's exactly what they were doing. They couldn't say the word, so they kind of had to
didn't for a long time, though, did they?
No.
It took them so long because they came at it from that scientific angle. They didn't want to get that ridicule, and it took them quite a long time to really get to that point. And that's totally understandable. What about you, Graeme? What do you think of the Hestalin?
Well, funny enough, Michael Mataluni, he asked me on Friday night when we were talking about the Foo Fighters on an Unidentified Celebrity Review. He said, you know, what did I think about the Hestalin lights? Did I think that they might have been responsible for the Foo Fighters? And I do actually address this in the book just very briefly. And I say, well, you know, Earth lights, I can't rule it out as a possibility because, one, I don't know enough about the subject, and I can't then say, well, it wasn't those, you know, categorically, and they could have been responsible for something like that. A phenomenon along those lines could have been responsible for some of the kind of stories that are in the book. But there are other ones where you just, again, I sort of fall into thinking, I don't think it's responsible for everything. It might be responsible for maybe some. I've seen a very small number of them. But I think if this was the case, I think these kind of things that have been seen in Norway would have been seen much more widespread, like everywhere, because that was what effectively the spread of the Foo Fighter cases and also everything that came afterwards. And I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I might be wrong here, but I'm not entirely sure that you know, that phenomenon, it sounds localized.
Yeah.
Sounds localized to particular areas, probably for particular reasons. It might be down to the kind of geological stresses. I believe that's something that's been put forward as to the reason why there's this kind of pent-up energy that gets released every so often. I'm not, you know, by any means, like, you know, read up totally on this particular field, and this is just what I understand.
Sure.
But I don't see that as being something that's, you know, kind of commonplace everywhere. That'll only be in certain places on the globe. So that to me, doesn't account for certain other stories, and also for the Tic Tacs, because bear in mind the Tic Tacs are over water.
Yeah,
and I'm not entirely sure how that would work over water. So, some, maybe Dan could explain that to me.
You'd be pretty much the piezoelectric effects. You're looking at pretty much fault lines. So if they run underwater,
so down San
that could
fault, in other
happen.
words.
but doesn't it have to do with some kind of crystals as well?
Maybe this is an idea that's been proposed, but the trouble is with the Hesterlin lights and the Earth lights in general is that there's a lot of ideas, but there's not really a lot of lab study going on and stuff like that. Yeah. So I feel like at some point Avi Loeb might photograph one of these things, and scientists will finally kind of get started down that road as we're kind of exploring all these other things as well. Because we know, not all, like Graeme said, not all UFO experiences are, ET or something like that. They could be other things. And it's no less fascinating to kind of go, wait, a ball of self-organizing matter that has anti-gravity properties and isn't affected by the wind and has a consistent surface temperature. Like, what? We can't. How is nature doing this? It's incredible,
But it also comes across as intelligent.
In some instances, it does seem that the more sizable it is, the more intelligent it seems.
But we are anthropomorphizing this, aren't we? We're putting out a kind of human kind of, sort of experiences into it and saying, well, it's following aircraft, but that's how we perceive it. It might not be. Yeah. It might be just how it acts, in its own state. It could
really be like weird. A positive charge, negative charge attraction thing. The whole water thing. The Hesterlin lights have been said to be attracted to bodies of water and certain things that similarly associated with the UAP. We just don't know. We need the study.
Yeah. I'm open to the possibility that there's some kind of unexplained phenomenon, and if that's the case, then that's tremendous in itself. That's almost as earth-shattering as maybe something from somewhere else. But to me, I know they were talking about, was it a car-sized ball of plasma, and that was about the biggest that they've discovered. Now, one of the Foo Fighter reports, I'm not going to give much away here, but there was a 200-foot-long object seen over northern Italy in 1942. Now, did they grow to that size? So it needs more study.
And it begs the question, doesn't it?
And scientific rigor. Not just study. It needs a lot more done.
It does. It's good that it's being brought up though as well. And so I say, to people like Campbell Moreira, it's good that he's bringing it to the forefront. I think semantics play an important part though. Don't go from 1 to 10 without going from 2 to 9 in between first. And that is
you kind
seriously
of
not
the bridge, right?
I'm not dissing him
sometimes either, by going too far too fast, you can switch people off to certain things when there could be valuable information down that road.
And I say that out of respect as well, because I'm not the kind of person to go, you're wrong. It certainly isn't that, because he might be onto something that connects somewhere in between. But I then go out to the bigger picture when you look at sightings of other things. Like, what about people that have seen huge physical craft, like triangles, for example, moving super slow over a populated area? You cannot really relate that to things like the Hesterlin lights. The things that we've seen in the Podesta emails, where things are coming in from lower or upper atmosphere past satellites and stuff, the Hesterlin lights and things similar to that seem to be very close to the ground, on like there's something happening underground that's drawing them to them. I mean, I'm kind of spitballing a little bit.
I would say that it has been proposed that certain factors play a part, like it has to be overground, and they have been disproven. These things occur over bodies of water and things like that. Okay. It's fascinating. To me, I think that it's more wondrous than we think. Just kind of saying ball lightning doesn't capture what's there and the potential. It makes it sound like swamp gas, and I'm not down for that. If it is the same as the Hesterlin lights, then the Hesterlin lights are something miraculous.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, do you know what then it always draws me back to is this conversation, or these little snippets that Lou's been putting out for a few months now, that everything is related, whether it be a tic-tac shape or a triangle shape, and they all correlate to the same thing, but for different purposes or reasons. Yeah, he's not ready to allude on that. He's stated that, well, in the near future, we're working on something when we may bring out the information where we can see the correlation between the different shapes. It's like, oh, man, you're leaving us hanging like a serious cliffhanger at the end of part 1 of a TV series or something. Like, do you know what I mean? So yeah,
it's dangerous to go down a road, though, isn't it, when you sort of like put your kind of, you know, your theory out on the table and say, right, this is what it is, because you end up getting yourself sort of penned into a particular kind of like, you know, sort of position where you end up having to defend it. And then you have to, that's when you see people twisting and turning, trying to take information and twist it so it suits their position, rather than just starting from the position, well, we've got this information, but we actually don't know what it leads to. I'm not telling anybody in the book, and this is probably no secret, that, I never tell anybody, oh, I know what this is. It's always this, it's that, it's that. I'd never say that, because actually I don't know what things are. This is the whole reason I'm in this, because I'm trying to find out. And I'm always fond of saying that there's no experts in this field, and if anybody says, oh, I know everything, I know what's going on, then you run like hell. So I'm not gonna if you get the end of my book, you're not going to find the answer, and I'm sorry, the people are going to look, they're going to find a whole load of interesting information there, but they're not going to find the key to the door, and I wouldn't expect them to. And I think and nobody picking up a book, for anybody's book about UFOs at the moment, is going to find an answer. They'll find more questions than answers, but that's really where we've been for the last 70 odd years. But to sort of send yourself down a road where you can't turn back because you've already said, look, it's these, it doesn't leave yourself any maneuver, does it? Because then that data could change tomorrow, Dan, couldn't it? It could send them down a completely different road, and that's where does that leave him? So
yeah, exactly.
This is not a dig at Campbell, but anybody that puts themselves in that position stand to be shot at, basically, don't they?
They do. Exactly. I think it's there are a lot of really out there ideas in this this subject, and it's great to share them so that they can be discussed. But being aware that something's being built to be discussed is kind of part of the process. No one's kind of got papal infallibility or anything like that going on here. What was the great quote that Lou said? And anyone that says they know what's going on is full of I don't want to have to get you your rating for the YouTube channel.
But no, you can share on this channel. You can.
we'll keep it
kid friendly.
But yeah, Graham's absolutely right. You've got to kind of keep all these maybe plates spinning and be okay with that, and that's a big part of being in this field. And again, like Lou said, if you're not willing to do that, you need to kind of maybe step away and put on the big boy pants and come back in 5 years.
Yep, that's the thing, man. Like, you've got to be able to take it. Even if you're not given it, you may say something completely innocent regarding this subject. Someone might come back at you a bit more harsh than you expected. And I think what I've learned is that you don't then just go to their level and argue the point like on their level. It's very difficult to navigate, isn't it? It really is. So I felt like I was about to give an alternative to how you do it. There is no answer. It's just hold your cool is all I can really say to people, Don't drop to levels, If you have put out a theory or something that may have sounded a bit more like factual, just withdraw a little bit and say, well, okay, I apologize. It may be more of a theory than me trying to say that this is what it is. And I think that's where I see people going wrong. And that's still quite broad, but I'd hate to be one of those people that I make a claim or a statement that is taken out of context because I don't have the vernacular, or I know it's difficult in a tweet and stuff with so many words, but I'm still not doing a good job of explaining this. But do you know where I'm coming from? It's like
here's a quote: "Arguing with idiots is like playing chess with a pigeon. No matter how good you are, the bird is going to shit on the board and strut around like it would anyway."
We see that regularly. So thank you. You saved me there, Graeme. So thank you. I really appreciate that, man. So guys, we're hitting on like an hour and 20 minutes. We could go on, but I feel like let's do this again. Let's do another UAP Media live on this channel in a few weeks. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got to get you on with Andy.
Man, well, listen, I did an Instagram live before this, and I said to people, and I've said to a few people, I need to speak to Andy. We've spoken in our private UAP Media chat, but yeah, I feel like I get the guy already. You know, we're friends on Facebook as well on that kind of personal level. So I, you know, he obviously sees my life that I don't put out to the world, and I see a little bit of his, and I like, yeah, I like this guy, and I think it'll be a great conversation for people to indulge and watch in. So,
do you know what? I was lucky enough. I was at last month to actually meet him in the flesh, kind of thing. We sat down, had a coffee, and like having a sort of like what was going to be probably an hour's chat or something turned out in 3 hours. We're just sitting around the table, just like throwing stuff backwards and forwards, and it was wonderful. And bearing in mind, I only really knew Andy before I joined UAP Media. As somebody who was doing a podcast, and I did actually, sort of listen to his podcast from day one, albeit maybe a week or two after he kicked off. And he was, to me, it was just a great start, how he came into it and how he started questioning people and the particular style he adopted. And it was just no nonsense, but asking questions that nobody else had asked before. And he had a really good rapport with people from the get-go. And I remember just listening to the podcast and trying to find podcasts that resonated with me. And I'd heard a couple of others from other people beforehand, because there wasn't that many around back then, sort of pre-COVID.
Sure.
And they were pretty, not awful, but they were just quite staid. That they weren't particularly exciting. They were quite knowing as well. You had to almost have like a certain amount of knowledge to get into them, which I felt was quite kind of limiting. And they didn't really say much. And one of the hosts just kept forgetting what he was saying in terms of what he was asking. It was just, oh, for God's sake, So it was just like cringeworthy. And then Andy came on the scene, and it was wow, this is really good. And then of course the guests he was getting was just something else as well. How the hell do you do this, mate? But then I get to know him as well. It was even better because he's just like how he is on the podcasts. He's great. But also by extension, people like Dan, people like Chris, Adam and Dave. Everybody's the same as well. They're really, really great people to know and to work with. I'm fortunate. I was fortunate the day they asked me to join, and it's one of these things I get again. I'll still pinch myself to think, am I really part of all this?
You had like a double whammy that day as well.
I've got imposter syndrome.
No, I feel exactly the same. I mean, it's been a month since I've been part of UAP Media UK, and when I had that meeting with Dan on that, let's take it back to. If all of you watching now live or anyone else, go back to the UAP Media episode that I put out on YouTube. We finished that conversation, and afterwards I said, look, if there's anything I can do to help UAP Media UK or anything, let me know. Funny enough, Dan contacted me the next day on this private chat, like a little bit ominous, and I was like, okay, what's going on here? We had this private chat, and that was where I got the invitation to join, which still to this day blows my mind, and is an honor. But this is something I've learned.
That one was, I'll just say that one was a funny one as well, because Graeme and I had spoken about, asking you in the future and kind of, speaking to the other guys. And then, a few weeks later, you kind of asked, and it was like, I remember the cat kind of got my tongue because I wanted to tell you that we'd spoken about it already, but I couldn't. I kind of, there were a few more people I had to kind of speak to, but as soon as, it was a no-brainer really for everyone.
That's incredible.
We had to hold our tongues when we were talking to you, but we're actually messaging each other at the time going, should we tell him?
Oh, no, that's incredible, man. And that's, I don't know how to react to that. It's humbling, and it's really nice. And it's something I say to people that take the time to watch my channels or follow me on Instagram. It just motivates me to keep doing what I'm doing, because it obviously shows I'm doing something in the right direction. I'm not very good at taking compliments and things like that, but it's still, I do my work and I do my research and I do my thing. So thank you guys, that's so kind. And I will just give a big shout out to everyone on UAP Media UK, but specifically yesterday or today, Chris Sharp wrote this incredible article where it's a very British folly, which is amazing. And that's so Chris Sharp, where he let me do a quote, and it really seems to have gone down quite well and opened up some more conversations on my end, especially through my social medias, and I think across others as well. So Chris Sharp, if you're watching or you watch this later, thank you, brother. I appreciate it. So I think that's given me a bit of confidence to maybe even start the thoughts of writing an article about something. So
do it.
I think I I think I might.
Anyway, I need to get back writing things as well, because that's what I was brought on for. So I feel like I'm sort of letting the side down a bit because I haven't written anything for UAP Media.
Yeah, but Graeme, I'll tell you what, I still revert back to your article about the intelligence authorization, the fiscal 2022 stuff. That article you wrote, I probably revert back to that once a day at least for the past few weeks, because of the little pointers that I need. There is one place I can go, and it's your article. So kudos. No, thank you, man, because it's invaluable. You know, if I get asked a question about it, I'm not going to some American thing over there and stuff, which most people would assume I should, because you've condensed it, but even not condensed it, because it's still quite a thorough article. It has all the important pieces of where we're looking for what's coming up with Dan's countdown, which we can probably talk about. Dan is bringing the countdown back.
Yeah, where's it now?
Did it 16 days.
There we go.
It is hold on. It's September 23rd. That will be the first 90-day update from the UAPTF to Congress. Whether there's a public facet of that, we do not know. Probably not. But you know, given that we had correct me if I'm wrong, Tim Burgess on the Big Phone Home, he was great. And he clearly had been into UFOs for a long time and had an interest in this phenomenon. And it was like, to me, I don't know about you guys, but that was a really encouraging moment at the Big Phone Home too. I was like, God damn, we've got this, a congressman on here.
This is the thing that Chris was saying in his article, though. Can you imagine one of our MPs coming forward and saying that on a news channel, or just on a YouTube group like this, or coming onto the Big Phone Home and saying, yeah, I'm really interested in this, I want to do something about it, I think we should be doing this, we should be having that? No, of course they wouldn't.
The Sun would have jollies with them, I think.
Well,
in spite of Henry's efforts, they would be the kooky MB. Yeah.
We're never. It's going to be a long time before we get that, I think. Here.
Yeah, but as we said earlier,
we're working towards that, aren't we?
There's, I wonder about the capabilities of the UK and whether we have the same capabilities as America or anything close to it, because they've had a bunch of upgrades and, they're the biggest military on the planet. So it might just be that we don't detect these things as much, and I'd be curious, because we know America's watching the whole planet. So I'd be curious to see whether America have told other countries, oh, hey, we're seeing these things over your, especially Five Eyes partners.
Of course. Yeah. Man. Let's have that discussion next time, because I think we're still in these days where I think it's still starting to ramp up a bit in my head a little bit. We're just seeing little snippets of that's quiet period ending. Maybe it's just because of the Big Phone Home and people like Graeme putting out books and these conversations are happening more, but maybe that has an effect. I don't know.
It does have an effect. Mick always says, oh, I'm tracking the Google trends for the UAP language. But not everyone's using that term. We're discussing things in other ways through other means. And all of them contribute to people using their voice to, we have these conversations in our rooms, then we have them out on the street, then we have them in restaurant, and it all builds to a paradigm shift over time. And we've been witnessing the shift. So just everyone keep going. If you want to make something, make it. If you think you can do better than someone else, I dare you to try. Go for it.
Next time I'm going to have that as a quote on the back of the book.
That was awesome. I like that.
That was great.
That came out of nowhere, Dan. I like it.
Yeah, sorry, Brent.
No, please. I
ruined it. I should have just dropped the mic and left.
So any final thoughts, Graeme, leading out, other than please everyone go and buy the book and follow it?
I wouldn't say that anyway, but I'm happy to be part of UAP Media, because it's a great vehicle for people trying to put the word across, not just to people like ourselves and the public at large, but also through journalism, also to politicians, to people who can make the decisions, like they've been able to do in the States. We need to be able to do that here, and finally found that I can make a tiny little difference in a group that's sort of pushing in that direction, and that's wonderful. And also along the way, I've been fortunate to meet and work with and be friends with a really good bunch of people. So I'm grateful every day for that. So yeah, thank you guys.
That means the world to me. Thank you so much, man. And I will give another shout out to our other colleagues, Dave. Partridge, we love him to bits. Can't wait to have him back on the show and speak to him some more. Andy McGrillen, Adam Goldsack, need to connect, man. Adam, Chris
good luck getting them on here, though.
Well, listen, I understand Adam's got a lot going on in his life, career, education, and all that kind of thing. Great. But yeah, it's just great to be a part of the whole thing. So, guys, listen, finally, just thank you so much for joining me tonight. It's always a pleasure, a super pleasure. So, yeah, I'll speak to you probably in like 10 minutes in the private chat. To everyone watching, go on, Graeme, you're going to.
Are you going straight onto Instagram now?
I think I'm going to actually. Yeah.
Okay, doing a post-mortem.
I am, but I've got another interview in half an hour, which I don't know is live on YouTube or not. I'll see. I've got to just check my messages. I'll allude to that in a minute. One word or two words, sorry, is actually no, because you're going to think something else. I'm going to say it. Mystery wire. But it ain't what you think it is. It ain't what you think it is.
Well, it's one of two, right?
Maybe one of 3 or 4.
Okay.
If you know Mystery Wire.
Okay. Fair.
So
nice.
I probably should have said that because the chat are going to go for the big wigs. But it might be pre-recorded, so I'll let everyone know. So I'm going to jump in Instagram after I've checked my messages and let everyone know. But guys, thank you so much. Speak to you soon.
Thank you. Speak soon.
Cheers. Bye.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Good night, guys.
Good night.